Welcome to Twisted Liquid RC Boats. Good day everybody, welcome back to Twisted Liquid RC Boats and the continuation in our Zippkits SLR missile Thunderboat build. Today we are going to install our second side on our frame, our left hand side, and as you can see since the last video I've spun the boat around on the table so I could give you guys a better view and you could see exactly the work we're going to do today. I released all the clamps off of my first side that I installed in our last episode, and I gotta say guys, as I've said before, I'm very happy with the way it came out. It's added a lot of structure, it's added a lot of rigidity to the frame. I can see that I'm level on all of my bulkheads, so I'll get a good floor fitment later on. I'm very happy with it. Today, before we do any work, I would like to mention something that I've ran into as I'm building the boat. I've always noticed that bulkhead number 2 has had a little bit of slight warpage or deflection in it since I've installed it in the jig. And I'm going to blame it on myself, that maybe the way I placed it in when the epoxy cured, it caused it to warp a little. I don't want that. I'm steady maintaining, keeping everything perfectly square. And I'm also emphasizing that the 2 slots in bulkhead number 2 have to go into our floor. So it's critical that we get their placement right. Whatever I done, it always seemed to push back and warp back on me. So I sat and I thought about it, and if you guys noticed when I was doing the engine rails in an episode before, I used a ruler across here clamped to the bulkhead to keep it square while I was doing the engine rails. But when I released it, it still had its deflection in it. So guys, I simply cut a couple pieces of pine wood that I had lying around with a perfect finished edge on them. I simply screwed them to the jig so that it will hold bulkhead number 2 perfectly square for me. When I glued in my side in that yesterday, I left this loose intentionally from epoxy because I want to get everything lined up perfectly later on. And when you put the side in, it makes your structure more and your rigidity more, keeps your square coming out from the center, your engine rails, and your boat gets completely built square like you want it. So all I've done, like I say, is added a couple pieces of wood, kept it straight. I do have a straight edge here, an aluminum straight edge, so you guys can see. No clamp on it, no anything. It's perfectly against the bulkhead. So, this is a fixture jig. And a fixture jig is for holding stuff fixed while you build. So if you do have to add something like this as you're doing your boat, don't feel bad. Don't think you're doing anything wrong. I'm blaming this on myself. I think the way that the epoxy cured simply didn't stay perfectly straight for me. Now all my other bulkheads are perfect. I've checked them with a square and I have no problems. So I'm pretty happy with the fitment of everything. So on that note guys, I'd like to take the time. We mix up another little batch of epoxy and we're going to proceed to put our left hand side on. Now because I spun the jig around, this is our left hand side, and you will be able to distinguish it from the right hand side by the exhaust vents in it. It will also be opposite of the holes for your turn fin in bulkhead number 3. I took the time guys as before, so I don't bore you on camera, and I've sanded out all the slots wherever they're to on the part, and I've sanded all the slots and all the edges of the bulkhead so I remove any laser burn, and it gives me a really good adhesion with my epoxy as I'm gluing my pieces together. So I'm going to install this side, clamp it, let it cure, get it done, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to finish off the fine adjustment of my bulkhead number 2, make sure it's perfect, clamp it, glue it in. And guys, I got a square frame built to my boat when I get these 2 steps out of the way. So, emphasizing, again, if you do have to do a little additional jig fixture work, by all means, go ahead and do so. It's only going to help you in the long run. On that note, let's stop talking. Let's get a little work done. Okay guys, we got a good coat of epoxy mixed up in our cup. Equal portions. We're using Bob Smith Industries 30-minute slow cure epoxy, full strength. We're going to mix it well. We're going to brush it onto our bulkheads. We're going to brush it into the slots of our part, our side. We're going to brush it into our slots in our bulkheads also, and we're going to clamp and secure our second side. Pretty soon guys, we'll have our frame done. It's moving along nice. I know I'm not a speedy builder, but we're building our boat at a steady pace. Every day we are mixing up a little epoxy. Every day we are adding a few more parts. Our unboxing video is January 4th. Today, as we record this, it is January 25th. So, we have got a fair bit of work done on our boat in 3 weeks, which is great. I'm quickly going to get working here. Get a coat of epoxy in my slots and on my bulkheads. We're going to get this side fit in place perfectly, like we did the other one. And once it cures, we give it time to cure. We're going to come back in. We're going to concentrate on getting bulkhead number 2, sorry. Perfect. Once again guys, work a little quick. You got time with your epoxy, but get your work done. Try not to make too much of a mess on your parts. Keep your boat appearance good as you're building it. Get your work done. Let's keep epoxy on our side in place. I got new cups. I found them light. But they're disposable, and it's good for what we're doing here today. Not going to take a lot to coat these surfaces. We're going to clamp it in the same procedure the way we clamped the first side. Seemed to work perfectly. Clamps on bulkhead number 4, clamps on bulkhead number 5, piece of tape across the transom. Make sure our alignment is good for our floor and our deck once we do get it in place, and we will be good. Okay guys, it's time to slide this fellow in place. Get things set up. And get another part of our boat built. And you can tell as you're putting it together. See how nicely that slid in? Right there, same thing. Right there. Same thing. And on the transom, same thing also. Okay guys, we haven't even got it clamped. We haven't got it taped. But it's slid in place perfect for us, which is what we want. We have a little bit of excess epoxy we're going to clean up here quickly before we do tape. Fitment on our bulkheads for our floor is excellent. Fitment for our deck is good. We can brush a little epoxy right here, making sure not to get it into a slot. We have a piece here we have to install our deck later, and it fits in a groove right here, so we want to keep it relatively clean. So now that we have that done, let's tape our deck, our side, and our clamp it and get this looked after. Can't call it a deck, it's not a deck, it's a side. Get it right. Again guys, pull your tape tight, so it pulls your joint tight as it's curing. Last piece of tape held the transom perfect, so take your time, get it right. It'll simply peel off. Let's put a couple strips of tape over where we're going to tape our bulkheads. We'll clamp them here. This will prevent our clamps from sticking to our epoxy, gluing to the side of the boat on us. Don't want that, that'll make a headache later on. Okay guys, we got to get a couple clamps quickly. Our clamp bag. Same as we done with the first side. I'm going to clamp right here at bulkhead number 5. Clamp it the same way right there. Bulkhead number 4. Checking my deck fitment, and I'm checking my floor fitment. The first time that I done the first side, I used my roll of tape, my foam sanding block, I simply put it in place like so, and I pushed it in. So I got my deck fitment here for my floor with my bulkheads. Perfect. Why am I calling it a deck? It's our floor fitment. So I'm simply using foam block and roll of tape to keep it perfect in the front for me, keep it perfect right there. I'm going to do the same thing as I've done over on the other side, guys. This is just a spare turn fin bracket I got lying around at home in my spare parts bin. I know it's a perfect 90. Bulkhead number 3 is not giving me too much of a problem. It's got a tiny bit of deflection, but as that side cures and I clamp and hold it, it's going to help it. I'm going to come in and mix up more epoxy anyways when this initially cures and do all my fillets and do around number 2, so not worried about it. So I'm just going to clamp this here to keep number 3 at a perfect right angle to my side, which is done on the opposite side for me when I was building. So if any epoxy cures, it's going to hold it perfect. Okay guys, we've got our second side in place. We've got it held. We've got it in perfect location. We got our second side installed. Yay! So all we got left to do now is get number 2 bulkhead squared up perfectly, epoxied solid. Guys, we got our frame of our boat built. After letting the first batch of epoxy cure for approximately a couple hours, I come back in and mix up a second batch of Bob Smith Industries 30-minute slow cure epoxy. I'm only concentrating on doing my inside fillets between the side and my bulkheads. I intentionally leave bulkhead number 2 loose at the moment to square it up perfectly later on once this epoxy cures. You may notice that I laid the inner chines in place to keep all my bulkheads perfectly square and added a couple additional pieces of tape to hold everything while I done my epoxying and it was curing. Okay guys, before I leave you today, just a quick review of the construction of our frame so far. After letting the epoxy cure overnight, releasing all the clamps on the sides that we installed, I went around the boat and checked my square again as I've been doing while I'm working. As I've said to you guys before, I'm very happy with the results. No matter where I check my boat to against my jig, I have maintained a perfect square with the sides that I have installed. If I check my bulkheads to my jig, I have maintained a perfect square coming out from the center and working my way out slowly. Now guys, you noticed that I left bulkhead 2 loose, and you guys also noticed that I added some additional wood to hold it. The way that I epoxied it in between my engine rails and my side was I put my square into my frame like so, and I clamped the square to bulkhead number 2. I done my epoxy work, I let it cure. After it cured, I released the square, and I maintained a perfect 90-degree angle with my bulkhead. The wood I have installed in the middle is still holding the middle of the bulkhead perfectly straight, but this is not as critical as what I thought it was from the start. And the reason being is, when we cut this boat off of the jig and flip it over, the piece of wood that I had a slight deflection in bulkhead number 2, we're going to cut it out anyways, because we need to remove it in order to be able to fit the engine in the boat. So we have everything built in our frame so far perfectly square, and this is exactly what we want. No matter where we check our boat to, no matter where we look, we have maintained the square of our boat. Now, the next thing I want to emphasize, and I've said this before, the reason it is so important that you do these steps and maintain the squareness of bulkhead number 2 as you're installing it is you need to have 6 11/16 of a gap between the outside edges of these slots. I measured the floor, and that is the exact measurement that you have between the outside edge right here, bulkhead number 3, and the outside edge right here, bulkhead number 2. So, if you keep it at a perfect right angle, and you install it correctly between your engine rails and your sides, you will maintain this measurement, and you will get a perfect floor fitment later. Guys, I'm really happy. It's took me a little bit of time to get the frame to where it's to right now, but I got the basis to build a good hydroplane here, because I've maintained my square from the middle out as I built. No matter where I worked, I kept everything at a perfect 90-degree angle to my jig. So, moving on, in the next episode, we're going to laminate our transom piece on, which we have to do back here. We're going to use some tight band. We're going to clamp it using a flat piece of MDF across it like so to distribute the load evenly across it. We'll probably put a few clamps on the outside edges too, just for additional support. We have a transom support that we have to glue in right here. Once we get that done, we have to put 2 inner chines in right here between our bulkheads. And as we do that, we're doing the same that we've done before. We're building our square out and maintaining the square of our boat. Once we get that done, guys, we got a big step coming up. We got to install the bottom. So guys, we're moving along nicely with our boat, and I'm very happy with the results so far. Can't say thank you enough. Twisted Liquid RC Boats would like to take the time to thank all you guys who are watching this build series, who are following along. We truly appreciate your channel support. I started doing this and I didn't expect the results that I'm getting because of the build series. So thanks guys, I really do appreciate you watching us build this boat. And I can promise you, we're going to take this boat to water and we're going to run it together and we're going to have a lot of fun with it and we're going to enjoy it. So there's a lot more to come. But once we get a few little steps done, we're going to take a big step of getting our floor on our boat, and it's going to be a big move ahead to getting this done and completely built. So once again guys, thanks from Twisted Liquid RC Boats. Have a great day out there, and everybody take care. Thanks for watching everyone. Please like and subscribe. Take care and stay safe.